International Olympic Committee generated $7.7 billion in commercial revenue over its last four-year cycle. The French government spent $7.85 billion hosting the Paris 2024 Games. According to the French Court of Auditors, France's national audit body, that is the number the public paid. Here is the thing. The IOC kept the billions. France paid the bill. And France is not an exception. Since 1960, the average Summer Olympics has run 172% over budget. Every single Games in that period exceeded its projected cost. Not most of them. Every single one. The Oxford University research on this is unambiguous. The Olympics is one of the most reliably over-budget megaprojects in human history, and the organization at the center of it holds $4.9 billion in cash and financial assets, is registered as a nonprofit in Switzerland, and pays no corporate income tax. The Olympics is not a sporting event that enriches the cities that host it. It is a revenue extraction model. And the people who designed it have been refining it for 30 years. Let me show you exactly how the machine works. The IOC has four revenue streams. 4. The first and largest is broadcasting rights. The IOC sells the right to broadcast the Olympics to networks across the globe. In the United States alone, NBCUniversal has a contract worth $7.65 billion, covering 6 games from 2021 through 2032. That single contract with one network in one country is worth more than the entire GDP of several nations. Global broadcasting rights revenue for the 2021 through 2024 cycle totaled approximately $4.7 billion, and that number grows with every new contract cycle as streaming rights are layered on top of traditional broadcast packages. The second stream is the top program, the Olympic Partner Sponsorship Program. This is the IOC's exclusive global sponsorship tier, where a small number of multinational corporations pay for the right to associate their brand with the 5 rings across every market on Earth. Top sponsors in the recent cycle included Coca-Cola, Visa, Samsung, Alibaba, and Procter & Gamble, among others. Top sponsorship revenue for the 2021 through 2024 cycle came in at approximately $3 billion. These agreements are negotiated directly by the IOC, not by the host city, and the revenue flows to Lausanne, Switzerland, not to the streets of Paris or Los Angeles. The third stream is domestic sponsorship and ticketing, which the IOC shares with the local organizing committee. This is where the revenue picture starts to blur. The organizing committee, which is a separate entity from the IOC, raises money from local sponsors and ticket sales. But the IOC sets the rules, controls the brand, and takes its share. The organizing committee absorbs operating costs. The IOC does not. The fourth stream is what the IOC calls Olympic Movement Revenue Licensing Fees, royalties, and other rights associated with the Olympic brand. Smaller in dollar terms, but entirely passive income for an organization that owns one of the most recognized visual brands in the world. Here is a number that should stop you for a second. The IOC says it redistributes 90% of its revenue to the broader Olympic movement national Olympic committees, international sports federations, athletes, and organizing committees. That sounds generous. But that redistribution is what funds the entire structure: the national committees, the qualifying events, the athlete development programs that exist primarily to produce the product that generates the $7.7 billion in the first place. It is less a charitable donation and more the operating cost of maintaining the pipeline. Let's follow the money into the host city, because this is where the gap between the IOC's revenue and the public's cost becomes undeniable. Oxford University researchers Bent Flivbjerg and Alison Stewart conducted the most comprehensive study ever done on Olympic cost overruns. Their findings, covering every Olympics from Rome 1960 through Tokyo 2020, found that the average cost overrun after adjusting for inflation was 172%. Every Olympics. Over budget, by an average of nearly 3 times the original estimate, not the outliers, the average. The numbers by event, Montreal 1976 projected $124 million, finished with $1.5 billion in debt that took taxpayers nearly 30 years to pay off. Barcelona 1992, often cited as a success, exceeded its budget by 266%. Athens 2004 went 211% over. Beijing 2008, roughly $43 billion spent, multiples above any original figure. London 2012 went 76% over a budget that was already large. Rio 2016, $20 billion. Tokyo 2020, held in 2021 with no spectators due to the pandemic, cost an estimated $13 billion against an original budget of $7.3 billion, a $5.7 billion overrun for an event with empty stands. Paris 2024 was widely described as one of the more fiscally responsible recent games. Paris used existing venues, leveraged the Seine for open water events, and avoided the construction of entirely new infrastructure wherever possible. And yet the French Court of Auditors confirmed total government expenditure at $7.85 billion, a number that excludes what the private organizing committee spent on top of that. The total all-in cost for Paris is estimated between $8 and $12 billion, depending on what is included in the calculation. Here is what the IOC contributed to Paris in cash and services, approximately $1.3 billion across the organizing committee, National Olympic Committee support, and services provided, $1.3 billion toward a host city cost of between $8 and $12 billion. The IOC contribution covered somewhere between 11 and 16% of the total cost, while the IOC retained all revenue from broadcasting rights and global sponsorship. So where does the money land? Let's follow it. The IOC is headquartered in Lausanne, Switzerland, registered as a nonprofit, and pays no corporate income tax on its billions in commercial revenue. The president of the IOC, as a senior official of a nonprofit, does not receive a traditional salary, but receives what the IOC calls allowances and benefits covering security, housing, travel, and expenses that are not publicly itemized in detail. The organization has faced repeated calls for greater financial transparency. The IOC's cash and financial assets stood at $4.9 billion at the end of the 2021 through 2024 cycle. That is the reserve, the amount the IOC holds after all its distributions. A nonprofit sitting on $4.9 billion in financial assets, while host cities absorb costs measured in the tens of billions. The National Olympic Committees receive funding from the IOC. The international sports federations, the bodies that govern each individual sport, receive funding from the IOC. Athletes receive a portion through various programs, though the IOC has faced sustained criticism that athletes' share of revenue remains disproportionately small relative to the commercial value athletes generate. There is no direct, publicly audited breakdown of exactly what percentage of the $7.7 billion each category of stakeholder received versus what remained with the IOC as surplus. The broadcasters on the other side of the equation, NBCUniversal, with its $7.65 billion long-term deal, recover their investment through advertising revenue. NBC's advertising revenue during the Paris Olympics was estimated at over $1.25 billion for that single event. The broadcast model works for the broadcaster because the Olympics delivers something increasingly rare, a live event that still commands appointment viewing and premium advertising rates. The rights fee paid to the IOC is the cost of accessing that audience. The audience is the product. The audience is you. If the evidence is this consistent, if every modern Olympics has overrun its budget by an average of 172%, if the IOC keeps the commercial revenue while cities absorb the cost, if the economic benefits are routinely described by independent economists as exaggerated or non-existent, why do cities keep bidding? The answer is a combination of genuine belief, political incentive, and a structural information problem. The genuine belief is real. Cities that host the Olympics do receive genuine global visibility. The infrastructure investments, when they are genuinely useful infrastructure rather than event-specific venues, do sometimes deliver lasting value. Barcelona is the most cited example. The 1992 Games accelerated urban regeneration projects that transformed the city's waterfront and transportation network in ways that the city would have eventually done anyway, but which the Olympic deadline and Olympic funding accelerated. The positive case is not entirely invented. The political incentive is also real and arguably more powerful than the genuine belief. The politician who wins the Olympic bid for their city receives immediate, unambiguous credit. The cost overruns arrive years later, often under a different administration. The political reward is front-loaded. The political cost is deferred. This is a structural incentive for politicians to be optimistic about bids, and for the optimistic projections that accompany bids to be accepted rather than critically examined. The structural information problem is the most underappreciated factor. When a city is developing a bid, the IOC, which controls the standards, requirements, and approval process, is the primary source of information about what hosting will require and what it will cost. The IOC has every incentive to present hosting as manageable and beneficial. The independent audit reports, the academic research on overruns, and the retrospective analyses from previous host cities are available but not foregrounded in the bid process. Cities are making a multi-billion-dollar decision with the seller as their primary information source. And then there is the bid cost itself. Tokyo spent approximately $75 million on its successful bid for the 2020 Games before a single venue was designed, before a single dollar of the actual hosting budget was committed. The cost of simply competing for the right to host is $50 to $100 million for most serious bidders. That money is spent before the city knows whether it has won. If it loses, as most bidding cities do, that money is simply gone. It is the entry fee to the lottery, and the lottery is run by the organization that benefits regardless of who wins. There is one exception in the entire modern history of the Games. One city that actually made money hosting the Olympics. Los Angeles in 1984 finished with a $215 million operating surplus. The reasons for that exception are instructive. Los Angeles was the only city willing to bid every other potential host had withdrawn siting cost concerns, giving LA essentially unlimited negotiating leverage with the IOC. The city negotiated terms no other host has been able to replicate. It used almost entirely existing infrastructure, kept construction costs minimal, and captured an enormous spike in television revenue from a newly competitive broadcasting rights market. The 1984 LA Games are cited as proof that profitable hosting is possible. They are equally evidence that profitable hosting requires conditions negotiating leverage, existing infrastructure, a willing-to-walk-away posture that essentially no other city has had since. The Los Angeles 2028 Games will be the next Summer Olympics held in the United States. The original bid budget was approximately $5.3 billion. As of 2025, estimates have risen. The city of Los Angeles is a co-host. The state of California is contributing. The federal government has committed security funding. And the IOC has already sold the broadcasting rights for those games as part of the NBCUniversal package, $7.65 billion for 6 games, regardless of what LA ultimately spends to deliver the event. The Milano Cortina 2026 Winter Games are already underway in terms of preparation. Italy's total public investment has risen significantly from original projections, as every host's cost has since the bid was submitted. The IOC's contribution is fixed. The Italian government's contribution is open-ended. The Olympics are going to be spectacular. Athletes will do things that are genuinely extraordinary. Moments of genuine human achievement will happen that justify why billions of people still watch. And that is precisely what makes the financial architecture worth understanding, because it is the product that is so compelling that makes the machine keep running. The games do not need to make financial sense for cities to keep hosting them. They just need to keep being worth watching. The math is not complicated, but it is consistent. The IOC earns billions from broadcasting and sponsorship rights it controls entirely. Host cities absorb costs that average 3 times their original estimates. The one city in modern history that turned a profit was the only bidder and negotiated accordingly. And 4 years from now, the entire cycle will begin again with a new set of governments making the same optimistic projections, and the same organization in Lausanne watching the same money arrive. The question worth sitting with is not whether you will watch. It is whether you understand who designed the structure you are watching and who is paying for the privilege of hosting it. I will see you in the next video. Bye.